photo sequence start in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What up, what up? What's up, folks? How y'all doing? Howdy. What's up? What up, what up? I hope you guys had a wonderful weekend and I hope you're having a wonderful day. So, y'all know me. Every time I come up here is because I want to talk about a very important subject. And today I want to talk about something that I I found out and I realized it's a subject that's not talked about. Not a lot of people talk about it, and I haven't heard about it. And the reason why I became interested in that subject is because um, from personal experiences from many years ago, and also I've heard other people talking about it, and I realized they didn't know how to deal with the situation because they were not well informed or educated about the subject. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna talk about this because this is very important. People need to know about this, so that way they can improve their lives and the lives of their children. So the subject that I want to talk about today is uh, child sexuality or children's sexuality and shaming. So why I want to talk about this, because like I said, I realized and found out that not many people are well educated or well informed about this, and the lack of education and information is hindering the proper and healthy development of their children. And I notice a lot of people don't know how to act, they don't know what to do, they don't know how to comprehend and process that information because they don't have the informational background, they don't have the education or the foundation or about the subject. So I want to talk about that. That's why I'm up here recording a video for you guys. So anyway, I'm going to try to do my best to compound. It's a lot of information, but it's important information. So I'm going to give you guys a kind of like a foundation or a historical background about, the origins of the studies of children's sexuality and how it develops, and what's normal behavior and what's abnormal behavior when it comes to child sexuality. So I want to give you a little bit of background and um, the information that I found. It was actually, I want to give you this. The reason why I give you this educational background or historical background, it's because I want you guys to know where I'm getting my information from and my references from. I don't want you guys to think that I'm just getting this information out of thin air. I'm just making this up. So this is legit, like legitimate information, like valid information I got from um, very famous scientists and psychologists and scientific studies that have marked and have influenced the world of psychology and the medical field as well, when it comes to human sexuality, specifically children's sexuality. So I want to talk about of one of the most influential and important figures in the psychology world. And those two figures, the main, most famous and most important figures that are the culprit of the development of theories about human sexuality and specifically children's sexuality. These two figures are Sigmund Freud and Alfred Kinsey. Also, there's another, a more modern researcher and scientist. Her name is Ingbeth Larsson. She's from Sweden. So she's a Swedish researcher and scientist too that specialized and focused on children's behavior, specifically children's sexuality. So I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to talk about them a little bit. I'm going to try to keep it. Try to keep it concise and do the best I can. So anyway, Sigmund Freud, you'll know. I'm sure you heard about Mr. Freud. I know a lot of people. He's very controversial, and a lot of people have mixed feelings about him, but for whatever reasons, and some obvious reasons. But you can't deny that Freud contributed tremendously, immensely in the field of psychology and in the medical field as well. He was a researcher, a scientist, a psychologist. He's the grandfather and the granddaddy, the daddy dandy of psychoanalysis and psychosexual development. And one of his first and most important works was the three essays on the three the three essays on the theory, the three S. Why I can't speak? Oh my god, I can't say. Oh my god, what the hell? Okay, the three essays on the theory of sexuality. That's one of his main works from 1905, and that work was kind of like the outline or the precursor of the theory of psychosexual development, which has 5 stages or 5 phases. And Freud came up with that theory, which is extremely influential, and it has ignited, or it was the foundation of the work of many psychologists and scientists that came after him. To mention Carl Jung. Carl Jung was one of his proteges, and he was a big-time Freud fan, and he followed his work and developed his own theories and worked utilizing Freud's work as a foundation, as a blueprint. And Alfred Kinsey, it's another super important figure in the world of psychology that was influenced heavily by Freud. And as them, there are many other psychologists that have been influenced heavily by Freud. And even in modern times, I mean, when I was going to school, to study psychology, and even before that in high school, I remember studying psychology and philosophy, and Freud was one of the biggest names, one of the the figures that we study a lot. And when I went to school for to get my degree in psychology, he was one of the main figures that is talked about in the books, and because he's the creator of the theory of psychoanalysis and the theory about human sexuality or psychosexual development. So I want to talk about why I want to give you this background, so you understand, you have an idea where our sexuality comes from, and how our sexuality as human beings develops or has developed throughout the years. So Sigmund Freud, created the like I said, the 3 essays on the theory of sexuality, and that was the precursor of the theory of psychosexual development. So the psychosexual development has 5 stages or phases. So you have the super famous oral stage, the anal stage, the phallic stage, the sexual latency stage, and the genital stage. So those 5 stages were Freud's theory of how he perceived that children's sexuality developed throughout the years, as you know, from the day they were born till adulthood. So the oral stage is, I mean, it's kind of obvious. The word that he used, the oral stage, is based on when people are orally fixated. If you realize, if you notice, like babies, when you have a baby and they're born, they're orally fixated. I mean, they suck on their thumbs, they put things in their mouth, they suck on their mother's breast, they put their toes, their feet in their mouths. That's the way children, like that's the way babies explore their environment. That's how they connect to the external world, is through their mouths. That's their object of investigation. So everything, if you notice, like babies, they're always putting things in their mouth. So that's their way to learn about their environment and to connect to the outside world, to the external world. And that's how they learn and how they investigate, through their mouths. So it's, of course, 'cause their sight is not as developed. So the sense that it's more or most developed is their mouths. Their mouths. That's why the first thing the baby does when it's born, they latch on mom's breast, and that's like an instinct. That's like a natural, primitive instinct. So their mouths are like very sensitive and very sensory, and they receive a lot of information through their mouths. So that's why he created that first stage, the oral stage, which is about oral fixation. And then that's from when they're born until they are 2 years old, 1.5, 2 years old. Then from the stage from 2 to I wouldn't say from 2 to 4 or 2 to 5, no, from 2 to 4 years old, it comes the stage of the anal stage. The anal stage is very focused on the sphincter. So that's the stage of our childhood where we focus our attention to the sphincter. And because that's the stage where we learn how to control our sphincter, how to go potty, how to go pee pee and poo poo. So that's the stage that we focus more on the control of our sphincters. So that's why he called it the anal stage. Then we move on to the phallic stage, which is an outdated term. I mean, obviously back in the day things were differently. I mean, we are still a patriarchal society, but back then was even more patriarchal. It was like hyper patriarchal, very male focused. Everything was overly focused on man. Obviously women didn't have a lot of rights back in the day, so that's everything was based on he and man. And anyway, I don't want to get into too much into it, but so hence the use of the word phallic. And phallic, the word phallic means its origins from phallus, which is the shaft of the penis of a boy, of a man. So phallic refers to the penis. So the phallic state is because from the ages of 3 and 5 or 3 and 6 is where boys, I mean obviously girls too, girls have are capable of pleasure and they have genitals too, but I'm talking about Freud's work, so I'm going to focus just on that. And so his phallic stage was based on little boys exploring themselves and touching their genitals, and kind of be hyperly focused on that area, on the genital, the phallic stage. That's when they explore themselves, they learn about their genitals, they start feeling pleasure or masturbating and stuff like that, but in a very basic, primitive way. Kids still don't have the concept of adult sex or adult sexuality. It's just like pure, plain, basic, primitive pleasure and curiosity, because kids are curious. That's how they learn, you know, because they're very curious. So, and then from the phallic stage, you have the sexual latency, which is from the years between 6 years old and puberty, or, you know, teen years. And that's the time where you become more aware about your sexuality, about your body. You're more curious about how things work. And you start learning more about masturbation and self-exploration in a more advanced and mature way. Very similar to, that's when the stage where you learn not only about your body, and your body starts changing, but you learn that you have sexual desires, and you have, you know, the concept and the context of adult advanced sexuality. That's the sexual latency stage. And then you have the final, which is the genital stage, which is from the age of 12, or no, my bad. The genital stage is from, you know, 16, 18 years old and up. That's your adulthood, and that's the stage where most people become sexually active. And then you acquire the concept, and you acquire the concept and the context of adult sexual activities. So then you have the maturity and the information that you can associate. Okay, this, you know, this is how it feels, you know, to feel aroused, and this is what sex is for, not only for reproduction, but also for like self pleasure, you know. So anyway, I think I focused too much on on Freud, but it's so fascinating because it's important that you have a background and know what these things come from. And then you have Alfred Kinsey, which his studies and his work, it was remarkable and quite important, because he was the first psychologist and the first scientist that created the first large-scale survey of sexual behavior. And even though his work was mainly focused on adult sexuality, he also focused on children's sexuality. And actually, he was the first researcher or psychologist that did or documented the first large statistical report about child masturbation and children's sexuality in general. So Freud and Alfred Kinsey are huge, super important figures that study the children's sexuality, and, you know, did a lot of reports and wrote a lot of work about that. And you can always look it up. You can look it up, buy books, or you can look it up on Google Scholar or YouTube. I mean, there's a ton of information about Freud and Alfred Kinsey work. And then there's another researcher. Her name is Ingebeth Larsson. She's a Swedish scientist and researcher that focused on children's sexuality, and her work is based or she uses Alfred Kinsey's work as reference. So she's heavily influenced by Alfred Kinsey, and she is like the more modern researcher that has studied children's sexuality and has made a really incredible and remarkable work about children's sexuality in modern times. So those three are like the most important figures when it comes to the professional and scientific study of children's sexuality or child sexuality. And I want to give you the background. So now that I'm done with that, now I want to focus on why that work and why those works from all these amazing figures in the world of psychology is so important. I wanted to give you the background because I want to talk about child sexuality or children's sexuality and shaming and what's normal and what's not normal. So, I realize a lot of parents are not aware, especially older school, like people, from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even 90s, are not aware of children's sexuality. So, when they encounter their children, exploring themselves, touching their genitals, or they catch their children playing with other children, they're showing each other's parts or trying to explore each other's parts, private parts, they freak out and they lose their shit. They lose their mind. Okay, water break. You know me. My voice, I talk so much. My voice, like, my throat it's dry. So I need some water. Some water. Anyway, back to the subject. So I notice a lot of parents that they don't know, they catch their kids, or they encounter their kids exploring themselves, touching their genitals, or playing with themselves, or whatever, or exploring other kids, private parts, and they freak out. They lose their shit. They lose their mind. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to respond. They don't know how to handle a situation, and they think there's something wrong with the kid or with the other kids if they find another kid doing the same thing. And especially in the I'm not sure if it's heavily, if these situations happen heavily here in United States, but I noticed that in Latin America, a lot of parents, especially, societies that are based on or founded on Christian, beliefs, or Catholic, heavily Catholic beliefs, or Christian, whatever denomination of Christianity you belong to. People that tend to be highly religious, not quite well educated academically, tend to freak out the worst and don't know how to handle situations. So they end up shaming their children. They end up yelling, calling names, chastising the child for something that is very normal. And I wanted to talk about that because children's sexuality is very real. It's legitimate. It's a real thing. Children are very capable of feeling desire, feeling pleasure, and it's a very, very normal, natural, normal thing. It's a very natural, normal, biological urge or desire, and people don't know how to handle it. So, if you're a parent, whether you're religious or not, and you find your kid or someone else's kid, or a nephew or a niece, or whatever, whoever the kid is, whether it's related to you or not, if you find and you encounter kids, touching themselves, exploring themselves, playing with their genitals, or trying to explore other kids' genitals, don't freak out. Don't lose your shit. Stay calm. And just, as when you encounter your kids playing with toys or whatever game, you're like, hey guys, what are you guys doing? How are you doing? What are you doing? Just ask questions in a very normal, calm way, even though I know, because we're adults and our minds are advanced and we're more experienced and corrupted. We may feel a little bit uncomfortable and kind of highly impacted by the scenario, but try to keep your cool, try to stay calm, and gather up your thoughts, get your shit together, and just talk to the children in a very calm, normal way, like, hey guys, what are you guys doing, what are you guys playing? And just know that's very normal. And just make sure that you talk to your children or to your child and teach them proper boundaries and proper behavior, and when and how and where to do self-exploration. So I want to talk about this because it's it saddens me to see people out of ignorance and misinformation or lack of information. It saddens me to see people hindering and damaging their children's innocence and psyche, and traumatizing their children from a young age, making them feel inadequate or odd or weird or defective, or yeah, making them feel like there's something wrong with them, when in reality there's nothing wrong with them. They're practicing something that's completely natural and normal. And if you're not well aware of the situation or educated about the subject, then when you find your child, whether it's playing with herself or himself, or playing with other kids, and then you freak out and you yell at them and you accuse them or chastise them, or punish them in negative ways and make them feel, yeah, shame, like shameful and ashamed of themselves and their privates, the child grows to have that trauma stays in their insides, because children don't have the concept of sex that we have as adults. They just know, they're just curious about their genitals, and they looked at them and they touch them like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool, this is kind of weird, oh, that feels good, and they play with themselves, and they have a very innocent, primal, basic knowledge of their sexuality and their private parts, and yeah, and their feelings. They have no concept. Their minds have not been corrupted like adults' minds have, and just they're innocent. They're age that they just don't understand that. So you have to be very mindful of that when you're talking to your children, or when you encounter them, practicing those type of behaviors. Just remember to stay cool and not to freak out, because I remember from personal experience, and of course, just back in the day, things were different, and in Latin America, people are not really quite well educated about this subject, and a family member encounter, uh, you know, this these little girls, they were like exploring with themselves, and they were like showing each other, because kids are they're curious. That's how the kids are, like little scientists. they they learn, um, they learn through exploring, with their hands and their vision, their sight, and their mouths, and they're curious by nature. And and kids, the phrase that says monkey see, monkey does. That's how kids learn. Of course, we have like primitive, natural, uh, innate instincts that we're born with, but as humans, the way we learn and we develop is through experiencing, uh, is through imitating, through replication. So whatever we see, we repeat, we replicate. That's how we learn, what's wrong, what's right, what's good, what's bad, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable or appropriate, in our society, in our tribes. So that's how we learn, since we're born. Not only by experimenting and touching and seeing and tasting, but by, with our sight. We mirror. That's why we have the mirror, the capacity to mirror others. And we're born with that if we're not autistic, obviously. We have the capacity to mirror others because that's how we learn. And when you learn the appropriate behaviors, that's a form of survival. That's how you survive in the world and within your tribe, and that's how you're accepted and within your tribe. So yeah, so I remember these family members encountered these these little girls, you know, that were showing each other's parts and kind of exploring themselves, and they freaked out. And I mean, they went crazy on this poor little girl and called her names, accused her of being a perverted monster and disgusting, and it was a little girl. It was this innocent, I think it was like maybe 5, 6, 7 years old. It was a little innocent girl. Like, she's just a child. She didn't know better. She's just doing something that's completely normal. And she was singled out and ostracized and punished and humiliated. And I'm sure this little girl grew up with having issues, you know, with feeling inadequate and odd and defective, and having self-esteem issues, and who knows the trauma, you know, what the trauma caused to this little girl. So I thought that was an important subject, because I want people to learn how to deal with natural and normal, you know, children's behavior. So I want to talk about real quick about what's normal and what's abnormal. What's normal children's or child's sexual behavior, and what's abnormal. So you guys have an idea and some type of contrast, so you know what to do in case of something like that happens. So what's normal? Normal is if you encounter your child or any child, you know, pulling their pants down or their panties, or lifting their skirt, their dress, whatever the case may be, and showing each other's genitals, like, hey, let me see what you have. Let me show you what I have. And if they have the same thing, you're like, oh, then we have the same thing. Or if they have a different, you know, genitals, oh, we have different genitals. And they may be curious and want to touch and explore. That's very normal behavior. Nothing to worry about. You find your child in the shower or in the bathtub taking a bath, or while it's asleep or laying down, touching their genitals or playing with their genitals and maybe masturbating. That's a very normal behavior. It's very normal. Don't freak out. I know it's a little, it can be a little bit impactful, but trust, it's very normal behavior. Even children are, they're curious about adults' bodies and adults' genitals. So if your child, you know, if a child showers with their mom or their dad, they're aware of how an adult human body looks like. So if they're the same sex, or, you know, biological sex, they're like, okay, you know, oh, mommy, you have the same thing I have, or daddy, you know, you have the same thing I have. So and also children are going to be curious about other adults' body parts, not only their parents, but, like, you know, if the parents have friends, or if they have, like, you know, other family members, like other like uncles and aunts and stuff like that, they may be want to, they are curious, and they will want to know how these people, these adults' body parts look like. Of course, you know, that's what the boundary thing, children have to learn the boundaries, that they cannot be touching or seeing everybody's private parts. But, you know, that's a very normal thing, that that kids are curious about not only other kids' body parts, but adults' body parts. So all the behavior, and of course all this stuff, it has to be done in a normal manner. If it's not constant and pervasive and aggressive, so as long as it's not pervasive, aggressive, and excessive, then it's within normal realm. It's within normal boundaries. So what's abnormal? Okay, abnormal child sexual behavior is when the child is constantly, excessively, aggressively, pervasively touching themselves down there, or in a very aggressive manner, they try to touch other kids, or they force, in an aggressive manner, they force other kids to touch them, or practice oral sex, or any type of penetration, whether using manual penetration or an object. That's abnormal, and that's a huge sign. That's a big sign that can lead to, this is a sign that the child has been sexually molested. I want to be generous. I would say 98%, 98% of the time. Not always, but 98% of the time, when children demonstrate or display that type of aggressive sexual behavior, not only onto themselves but onto other children, it means they're imitating, they're replicating what the child abuser, or the whatever, the pedophile that abused them did to them. So they're repeating, they're replicating that behavior, and that's abnormal. So if that's the case, not always, that's not the case always when children, display or demonstrate abnormal sexual behavior, but most likely, most of the time, it means that the child has been sexually abused. Unfortunately, it's a very, very sad and horrible thing to encounter, and to come to a realization that your child has been sexually molested by someone. And most likely, I mean, adding, kind of changing the subject a little bit, most of the children that have been sexually abused, most of the time it's been done by someone that you know, whether a family member or a friend of the family. It's very rare when it's done by a stranger. So most likely it's been done by a family member or a friend of the family, someone that's close to the family. So yeah, that's the, when children display the type of abnormal behavior, is because most likely they have been sexually abused. The second thing could be the second factor. So there are three factors. That's one of the first factors. They were probably sexually abused. The second factor is that they may have some medical problems, some medical issue in their genitals. So they're like constantly rubbing or scratching, excessively, and they seem like they're in pain. You have to take them to a pediatrician, to their doctor, so they can get checked out and make sure they don't have any medical issues down there. Maybe an infection or some type of allergy, or another type of medical problem. So you want to take him to the doctor and get him checked out, for just to rule out any medical issues in their genital, in the genital area. And then the third factor is that some kids, is a small percentage, of course, but some children are born with congenital issues. They are born, their brains and their nervous system, have been wired differently, and they're born with some type of behavioral issues, or some type of mental disorder, some type of mental issue. So those kids tend to be very aggressive. Their self-exploration and masturbation seems to be very pervasive and excessive and aggressive, and they lack of the sense of modesty and boundaries, and they tend to masturbate aggressively and excessively in public and in front of people. They don't have the sense of, like I said, a sense of modesty or boundary, and they do it from a very early age. So that, it's another abnormal type of child sexual behavior. So if your kid, or any kid, but I'm talking about if you have a child or children, if they display, that type of abnormal sexual behavior, like I said, you want to take them to a doctor, a pediatrician, and also a therapist that specializes on children's children's behavior, and to find out what's going on, and to help your child to improve that problem. So I wanted to talk about that, and let you know, guys, about the grandfathers of sexual development and and psychosexuality, or children sexuality. And you know, and I wanted to talk about what's normal, what's not normal when it comes to children's sexuality, and how to handle situations. So when you see that, please don't freak out. Don't shame your child, or any child for that matter. Take things, stay calm and collected. Handle the situation with care. Make sure you use age appropriate vocabulary, and make sure you teach your children boundaries, healthy boundaries, and teach them about modesty, about that they are autonomous of their own bodies, like they own their bodies, and it's okay for them, it's totally normal for them to explore themselves and play with themselves, but it's not okay for other people to touch them. And especially if it's an adult, you have to teach them that they're not, other people are not allowed to touch their private parts or their bodies. They own, they're the owners of their own bodies. So, and teach them that whatever they want to do, they have to do in private, whether it's in the room, in the bathroom, not in public, not in front of other people, and that it's not okay to touch other kids if they don't want to be touched. You have to teach your children, of course, like I said, you use age appropriate language, and talk to them in a very nice, calm manner, because it's a very normal thing, and that way they will not grow up feeling weird, awkward, or inadequate, or like there's something wrong with them, because there's nothing wrong with them. It's a very normal, natural human behavior. Just it's sexuality, it's real, it's valid, it's a natural thing. I don't know why people freak out about it, and they feel so embarrassed and so awkward talking about human sexuality, when it's just part of who we are. It's part of nature, it's part of being human. That's how we get here. Like, how do we get here? How do we get here? Through the Holy Spirit? We're just born, in thin air? No, we're born because we copulate, we reproduce. We have sex. It's a very normal thing, to have sexual desires. Of course, like I said, children, when they're young, they don't have the concept of sex that we have as adults, or as when you're a teenager. When you're a preteen or a teenager, an adult, you start understanding the concept of adult sex. And when you're a child, you're innocent. You don't know better. You don't have the concept. So all you know is like, oh, touching here feels good. So and yeah, and remember, when kids do things because they replicate, they imitate. They're just imitating what others see. And nowadays, shoot, TV, all the shits on TV, Netflix, TV shows, movies, YouTube, there are tons of movies and shows that have, very explicit sex scenes, and especially violence. Shoot, violence is way worse than sex. And it's funny because, violence, extreme violence is totally cool. It's totally okay for American people to show super gory, crazy, violent scenes in movies and TV shows. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to sex and sexuality, people are like, no. That's a hush hush. that you got to, like, you know, sweep it under the rug. It's a taboo thing. And I know it has to do with our puritanical, sanitizing, creed-based mentality, and you know how a lot of people were raised and associated, you know, in society, you know, with a lot of outdated religious beliefs, and there are not really founded on legitimate scientific research. So, and of course, I respect people's creeds. You will believe in whatever you want to believe. That has nothing. That shouldn't have nothing to do with reality and with science. You can be religious. You can believe in whatever you want to believe, but you have to come to reality, and you have to accept the fact that science is real and the human body does things, and you know, humans, and you have to come to, you have to reconcile those two things. You have to come to the conclusion that sexuality is a very healthy and very normal, a very healthy and normal biological need. So we have the it, the ego, the superego. The it is the very, you know, our basic primal necessities like hunger, thirst, sex, sleep. You know, we all have those needs. You can't hide that. You can't, you know, deny that reality. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for your time and for your attention. I know it's kind of hard to stay engaged in a long video, but this video required more explanation. So I gave you like a base, a foundation, a historical background of who were the creators of the theories of human sexuality and children's sexuality. And also I want to talk about, you know, personal experiences about children's sexual behaviors, what's normal, what's not normal, and my opinion about it, and my experiences about it. So here we are. Okay, thank you so much for your time, for your precious time. Thank you so much for your attention. I truly appreciate that. And take care. Love you all. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. And remember, practice gratitude. Everything you have, be grateful for everything you have, because you think you don't have enough, but you, compared to other people, you have a lot. You're rich. Sometimes we feel like we need more, we want more, but if you have health, you have a family and friends, people that love you, that support you, you have a roof over your head, you have food, and you have everything. You're beyond blessed. So so yeah. So thank you so much for your attention and for your time. I appreciate that. And remember to practice gratitude. And as always, stay strong and stay metal. Peace.